screen that we are being recorded. And we do that in case if you have a neighbor or somebody that wasn't able to be with us tonight and you'd like to share this information, or they want to get on and watch this, they'll have the ability to do so. It should be posted here in the next couple of days on NDOT's website, the Traffic Calming website, as all of our meetings are. So feel free to avail yourself of that. Also, you have the ability to unmute yourself as we go through tonight. We're usually a pretty small group at these meetings and try to keep it as informal as possible. So feel free to do that, unmute yourself and ask any questions or make any comments as we go. That will be just fine. Otherwise, I would ask that you keep your computer muted on your end. It usually is a little bit clearer signal for everyone. You can also use the chat feature. If you see that little button there that says chat, I keep my chat window open on my end. So if you'd rather not speak out loud, feel free to type that and I'll try to address those as we go as well. See Councilman on the call with us. Appreciate you being here, Councilman. Is there anything you'd like to say before we get started tonight? I'll try to leave an opportunity if you do.
Just thank you for organizing this meeting.
Absolutely. We appreciate your attendance as well. Thanks again to all of you all. I'll try to be pretty concise, but a couple of things we're going to cover tonight. One is a little bit of a background on the traffic calming program and how Hillwood got inducted into it. Secondly, we'll look at the plan. That's where I like to spend most of the time and talk about what we actually, at a very conceptual level at this point, actually have proposed for the street and get your feedback on that. And then lastly, we'll wrap up by talking about some next steps, as I mentioned, how this process works and where we're going from here. So without further ado, let me see if I can make this go forward. There we are. So as the more projects that we do in Nashville, I think people are getting more and more familiar with this program, what traffic calming is all about. But this is a residential street program. We don't typically do traffic calming on streets that are completely commercial or industrial, things like that, because we know it's a safety, speeding is a safety issue, but it's also very much a quality of life issue. And so we've tried to target these resources to your residential neighborhoods where you're trying to live on this street and use the street for your day-to-day needs. We do focus on physical solutions. We'll show you some tools that we have. In fact, you're familiar with them. We've got a feedback sign on Hillwood Boulevard already. So we do have some tools like that are a little more educational, but we find that we get the most effective slowing of speeds when we put something physical in the road. That's something to drive around, to drive over, those types of things. And then we do focus on speed reduction. That seems obvious. I guess it kind of is, but some people will engage the program hoping that we can shift traffic away from their street and put it somewhere else. And that type of traffic diversion is not really what we're after. We're just trying to get traffic to slow down where it is and drive more responsibly in your neighborhoods. As I mentioned, there are some other aspects to traffic calming. This is not, all of it. We do focus on engineering. That's what NDOT is all about. They manage everything in the right of way. And so we really focus on, what can we do from an engineering standpoint to change the road and the context of that. But we do know that enforcement's a big aspect of traffic calming. We have great partners at MNPD. Unfortunately, their resources are just not such that they have a lot of time to go out and do traffic enforcement and park a cruiser there at the end of the street and write tickets. We wish they could. I think that would help, at least in the short term. But again, they're doing a lot of very important work. And so we partner with them, and they're very big supporters of the program because we are able to address this problem from an infrastructure standpoint. And then, as I mentioned, there is some education that goes on as well, not just in the way of feedback signs, but NDOT and potentially others are working on, some public service announcements and things you may have seen, Channel 3 or some other areas dealing with speeding traffic and the impacts of that. So we know that's a big part of it too. One of the messages that we really like to push out there with regard to safety is the impact of speeding in neighborhoods, especially on pedestrians. And we know a lot of people engage this program simply because they don't feel safe walking in their neighborhood, up and down their street. Some people don't even feel safe checking their mail at the end of the mailbox. It can be that bad. And so we like to show this graphic just to reinforce why we're trying to slow speeds down. I think most people who have gotten selected for one of these projects have done so because they recognize a speeding issue on their street. But anyway, for what it's worth, we know that speeding has a big impact on survivability in the event of a crash, and so that's what this graphic shows. This continues to be very much an in-demand program. In the same cohort that you all are in the traffic calming program with, we had over 500 applications just like the one for your street that we simply can't get to. But we just like to show this just so that you recognize you're not alone in this. It's certainly popular and again, very much in demand. We're working with that to try and address those streets that are most in need of the resources. The past summer, there was some excess budget money, and council saw fit to allocate some additional funds to the traffic calming program. I think largely because there's such a desire for it, and so doing 85 projects where we typically do about 50 a year. Over this past 6 months, we're tackling 85, and so there's a lot of streets going through this process right now. You're one of those, anyway, it's a very popular program. There are some things that we can address in this program. Sometimes people will ask about sidewalks or ask about, getting a stoplight or stop signs, those types of things. And while they are very much related, they're absolutely appropriate requests. We don't have the tools in this program to answer those requests. And so we always like to plug Hub Nashville way to start that. It's hub.nashville.gov. You can also pick up the phone, call 311 and talk to an operator there. And this is a clearinghouse for all things from Metro government. It's not just NDOT, just about every department is represented there. So if you're not familiar with that resource, to us here in Davidson County, it's a great one, and I encourage you to make use of that. But back to Hillwood itself and how it got into the program. We, with 500 requests for service like that, we simply can't get to those. So we try to prioritize it. And this is a pie chart that shows the metrics that we use to put together a score that prioritizes all those requests. So we know which are the most needed projects in the county. About 70% of that score is from data that you probably would have guessed. It's the amount of traffic on the street and the speed that traffic is traveling on the street. But then the other 30% get to some of the other aspects that we've talked about, most notably pedestrian uses. Was there a documented pedestrian crash on the street? Does it have, when it says non-driver accommodation, does it have things like bike lanes or transit stops or sidewalks? You all obviously know very well you don't have sidewalks, and so that actually drives your score up. It makes you higher in the priority list. And then lastly, trip destinations. Are there things that a person might want to walk to more than in other streets? Are there parks nearby, libraries, schools, those kinds of things? So we take all of that data and roll all of that into a score, and then that's how we determine the highest prioritized needs in the county. This is what the data looks like for your street. We documented, we measured the speed at 36 miles per hour. That's not exactly average. Sometimes it's easier just to call that the average speed, but it is actually the 85th percentile speed, which simply means 15% of the traffic was going faster than 36 miles an hour. So we use that 15% number. It's kind of an engineering industry standard that says that's a significant number, significant enough portion of the traveling population that if it's above a certain speed, it's kind of a speeding problem. So you're at 36. That's pretty typical for the streets that we see in the traffic calming program. Where you're a little bit higher than most streets is the traffic volume. You've got over 4,000 cars a day on the street. We sort of have a somewhat of a threshold for the type of traffic calming that we're going to be talking about tonight at about 5,000 cars a day. So you're on the upper end of that scale. Most of the streets we work on are a little bit lower than that, but you're still well within those thresholds that we use to do things like speed cushions. And you've got a street width of 21 feet. Again, pretty typical for a metro street. You don't have wide shoulders. You don't have on-street parking. You just got a kind of a typical Nashville suburban street at just about 11-foot lanes out there. Nothing that we can't deal with. That'll work very well. It is longer than our typical street. You're a mile and 3/4 for the section that we're looking at from Charlotte to Post Road. So that's a little bit longer than usual. We've certainly done streets that long before. Here's a map of that. So I'll try to describe it a little bit more. We got a lot going on here, but this is a snapshot of an interactive map that is on NDOT's website. So feel free to browse over there and you can take a look at projects all over the county. This just happens to be your section. You probably see Hillwood Boulevard. It's not the clearest right there, but it's that green line running kind of diagonally right in the middle of the screen. And so we are going from Charlotte, where you see up there at H.G. Hill Park, up at that north end. That's the north end of the north terminus of the project, down to Post Road at the south end. The green color just means that this is a project that is in the design phase. It's in the meeting or the design phase. You see another road right next to it. That's Wilsonia, which I believe is also having their meeting here a little bit later tonight. So I wanted to show you that just so you know that this street right next to you is also kind of going through the process right along with you. And then you may see some others. I'm not sure. I've kind of got things covered up here. Yeah, Woodlawn you see is in your same stage, and maybe others. The purple lines indicate a street that has an application in, but it has not been selected. It has not risen to the top of that prioritization process that we talked about. And then you've got some other colors there. The blue dash lines mean that there is a finished project on that street. And then there's one that it's in the construction queue that's pretty close to you. I believe, yeah, that's Knob Road. That just means we've gone through all the meetings. They've gone through the ballot. That one passed, and so we're just waiting for construction on that. So anyway, this is a good resource if you have an interest in what other streets around you are doing, where are we planning to do traffic calming and those kind of things. And if you're not familiar with speed cushions or the types of treatments that we use, this could be a tool to help you go find those in a place that's close to you if you want to drive those and test them out. All right, a few of the tools that we'll use. I'll really focus on what we've got proposed for this street, but I'll show you everything that we kind of consider. This will be like probably 99% of our projects are a speed cushion based project, and speed cushions are these modular rubber, recycled rubber, factory formed devices that we order. They make them, they send them to us, and we bolt them down to the pavement. You see them here. We can configure them several different ways. Most common is either a 2 cushion configuration, like you see in the upper left-hand picture, or a 3. The only difference there is that we want to make sure that people can't drive around these. So we want to put enough of a treatment out there at every location that people can't drive around, because we know from experience that if we give them enough room on the edges there, that they'll certainly do that. So we use signage like you see in the upper left-hand picture. Occasionally we'll use like a white flexible delineator, a little plastic post. You see some of those in the bottom right hand picture. All of that is just intended to make sure that traffic has to encounter these speed cushions, because that's the business end of the traffic calming project. They're 6 feet wide, which means you can't straddle them. You're going to have to put one side of the vehicle on these. But they do come in these sections, and we leave gaps in between so that some vehicles will be impacted less than others. And so we want to make sure that things like ambulances and fire trucks can get through with as little impact as possible. And so that's the reason why they have these gaps in between them. The other design feature that we have, or design choice that we have, is how long to make them. So long in the direction of traffic. Our standard is a 10.5 foot long speed cushion. That's like you see in the bottom left hand picture. It's one section that ramps up, one flat section on top, and one section that ramps down. We can take out that flat section and make it a 7 foot cushion. It's more aggressive, and so it yields a slower speed. We tend to reserve those for some of our more urban environments. Or we can add another flat section in there and make it a 14 foot speed cushion. And again, that makes it less aggressive and therefore a higher speed. And so we typically reserve those for some of our more rural areas. So anyway, that's just a design feature that we have. But in all cases, it's a 3 foot high speed cushion. Everything else about it is identical to what you might experience on another street nearby. Very close cousin to it is the speed table. We use these very sparingly, again, because of the impact to emergency vehicles. But in some cases, and I think Parks is using these, in some cases we find that this is a little bit better feature, but we don't use them much. We do have some before and after data. I think if you've driven these, most people will agree that, it's pretty self-evident that these do slow down traffic. But NDOT does have some data. They'll continue to collect more as we get more deployments of these. But at that time, they're finding something like a 9 to 12 speed mile per hour speed reduction where these devices have gone down. But I would caveat that a little bit to say every street is different. The spacing of these is different. The land use is different. Just there's a lot of differences there. But we're very confident in the effectiveness of these speed cushions. Feedback signs continues to be part of it. As I mentioned, I know you have one of these on the street, and we continue to use these, especially in cases where maybe the road is too steep, and we'll talk about that. I know you have some hills on the street. We don't put speed cushions on a real steep hill. Very sharp curves you might have. Some cases have a lot of driveways. We work really hard to keep these at least 15 feet away from driveways. Again, this is not a problem for you all. You have big frontages along Hillwood, and so we don't expect that to be an issue at all. But those are some types of considerations where we might use a radar feedback sign instead of a speed cushion sign. Occasionally, we'll use pavement markings just to kind of visually narrow the road. We don't do that very often. It can lead to kind of an understanding that if there's a double solid yellow, maybe that communicates that it's a more major road and you should go faster. So we do that very sparingly. And then there's some more urban treatments, bulb out chicanes, where some of these areas, urban areas where there's on-street parking, it leads to some really wide intersections. And so we try to narrow those using a couple of different treatments here. And then traffic circles we keep in the toolbox. We haven't installed one of these in a few years. They just have a lot of unintended consequences from things like school buses often. So we've kind of backed off of these to some degree. And again, you got to have a lot of pavement out there, very, very wide streets for those to work. So that brings us to the plan for Hillwood Boulevard. And again, I would stress this is a concept at this point. This is for you all to look at and react to. We really like to use these meetings to get your feedback on these, whether it's what you expected to see or not, or like it, you don't like it. All of that is helpful for us. But let me kind of walk through it. First thing to note is our north arrow is not exactly north. We've rotated a little bit to get more on the slide, but Charlotte Pike is over there at the little traffic signal logo on the far left side, and then Post Road is that last stop sign on the right side. You see a couple of other stop signs along the way going from left to right. You see Fleetwood Drive there. That's an all-way stop. You see West Hillwood as an all-way stop, and then Red Oak, and then of course at Post. We put those on there because those become sort of a break point or a control point for us as we're laying out how many sets of speed cushions we would propose. If you look really carefully, you might see some yellow numbers there. And so in between Post Road and Red Oak on the right-hand side of the screen, you might see an 830 feet. That's the distance between those two stop signs. And that becomes important for us as designers because we want to space these speed cushions so that we're somewhere in the order of like 400 to 600 feet apart. We know that if we can be in that spacing, somewhere around 500 feet, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, then we will be in good shape. That's close enough together that traffic won't clear one set of speed cushions and then step on the gas to get to the next one really fast. But it's far enough apart, we hope, that it's not just totally obnoxious and drive all of you all crazy who have to drive over these every day, or that it will push traffic to some other street. I don't think there's a great alternative here for Hillwood, so I'm not too concerned about that. But that's kind of the part of this is close enough together, but not too close together. And so that's what we've tried to show here. The other thing, as I mentioned, on Hillwood, that's a big consideration for us is the hills. I know as you're going toward Charlotte from Harding, once you clear Hillwood, for instance, there's a big grade up, and so you may see a bigger gap between that stop sign at West Hillwood and that first speed cushion that we've got the little symbol there on. That may be a bigger gap because that's a pretty good hill going up there. And as I mentioned, we've got some parameters that we have to work with when we're talking about grades. Just for reference, you may see the little radar feedback sign. That's the little red diamond with an R in it. That's pretty close to the Forestwood intersection. We would propose leaving that. One reason there is because, again, that's on a pretty big hill, so we have a little bit bigger gap between the speed cushions, and that's exactly why we use things like radar feedback signs in there, just so people are reminded as they go down that hill their speed, and hopefully that gives a little slower speed in that area. I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory, but if I've missed something, feel free to ask and let me know that. I guess the only other thing I would mention is over on the Charlotte end, that first block there is really commercial. We wouldn't typically do things in that commercial area, so none of the businesses and all, as traffic comes off of Charlotte and wants to access those businesses, it's too close anyway, probably, but that traffic would not encounter a speed cushion. Again, this is really to communicate to drivers that are coming into your neighborhood that you are coming into a residential area and you need to slow down. So we like having that first speed cushion there just after you get through that business area. One other thing I guess I will mention, and then I really want to hear from you and any feedback that you may have. You see that note there on the top, and again, slopes and grades. I just want you to know that this is all done based on kind of a desktop review. I did drive it a few weeks ago just to kind of get a sense of those hills, but we will be back out and do a more detailed on the ground design. So just know that what you're seeing here, we may change it. We may have to pull one out or shift one around or something like that. But we think we would get a really good result with this, and we think this plan could work. So what feedback or comments or questions do you have?
Hey, I'm going to jump in right now because my name is Tom Cooper and I live in that section between Fleetwood and Charlotte on Hillwood Boulevard. And so I'm really happy about this particular proposal. The stop sign at Fleetwood and Hillwood is basically ignored by so many drivers who are using it as a cut through to White Bridge Road, right, from Charlotte. So while the speed cushions may address some of that, incentive, is there any potential to kind of monitor or enforce the stop sign with cameras or something like that is part of the proposal?
Good question. And we hear that a lot, that, stop signs are out there and they're treated as somewhat of a suggestion and not very well adhered to. Once those stop signs go in, and this is why we don't do stop sign as part of traffic calming, right? I mean, it's not their intent. And so, but once those stop signs are in place, there's not a whole lot we can do about them. We don't have any additional ability to enforce. If it's something like it's not seen, like you think people just don't recognize it's there, the sight distance isn't good or whatever, there may be some additional signage or something like that we could do. But typically we find that's not the case. We typically find people just get used to it. They always know every time they come through, there's not a car on Fleetwood. And so they just kind of keep rolling through at best and, hopefully slowing down some. But unfortunately, there's not a real great tool that we have beyond the stop sign itself.
This is Norm Scarborough. I appreciate you all taking time to do this this evening. I'm also very pleased that you're trying to address this problem, which has become, a significant issue for those of us that live here on Hillwood. I don't know, why people are going through here so quickly, and it's rare that I don't see a fair amount of traffic here these days. It's increased a lot over the years, as you probably know. Two questions though. One is, how are these cushions going to impact the use of snowplows for us? Because that's something that, as you said earlier, we have a lot of really bad hills, and when on the occasions that we do get snow here, it's really difficult to get up and down the hills without them being plowed.
Yeah, and we were all reminded of that. It feels like not very long ago.
Yep.
Which was a great case test for us, because over this past year we've put out a lot of speed cushions, and so we were really interested to see and you probably know, but NDOT is the one who is plowing. The same group we're working for tonight is the same group that does that. We were interested to see, are we going to get a lot of feedback? Are people going to be calling saying, hey, they just plowed up all our speed cushions? We didn't hear of one of those. And the reason is because we're in very close coordination with that operations team that does the plowing. We maintain a map. It's a GIS map. And I believe that the drivers actually have that programmed into the plow trucks. They know exactly where these are. The other thing about it is, I think this is going to be true on this project because there's enough intersections and space in between these speed cushions that we will be signing every location. So that little picture that you see down at the bottom of this slide where you've got a yellow sign, that will be there as well. That's another very visual clue to a plow driver that there's a speed cushion here, and so it's worked well so far. And again, on those steepest part, we won't have any cushions at all. We'll put them at the bottom of hills or tops of hills, or ideally in more flat sections. But good question on plows. It comes up sometimes, but
inhibit the use
done really well.
In other words,
say that again. I'm sorry.
So installing these will not prohibit the use of snowplows on Hillwood.
Not at all. Not at all. No. Yes, streets do. We do not change the plowing status of a street just because it gets speed cushions.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
is Mike Burr. We're in the 400 block of Hillwood. Happy to see these efforts because I think we've seen a lot of traffic, a lot of high speeds. We lost our mailbox last year, found it 2 yards down. Couple questions. I think you had made reference earlier to the different types of speed cushions. Some that were aggressive, I think 7 feet, maybe 10 feet and 13 feet. Can you share with us how aggressive these are going to be? Are they going to be, I think, the middle of the road, maybe 10-foot ones? Second question is, I noticed in the sign here, it says speed hump 20 miles per hour. Is that the speed that you all will be targeting for these, acknowledging our speed limit here is 30?
It is. Yeah, good question. So we would propose on this street using that 10.5-foot cushion, that middle of the road length. And what we're looking for in that is an average speed, over the length of this street to be somewhere in that 20 to 25 mile an hour range. What we find is people will generally this is anecdotal, but as I drive behind people on a street that has speed cushions, I find that people drive them much slower than they really need to. I mean, you can drive over these. Most cars, I mean, maybe something that's just an unusually small car or whatever has to slow down more or low, but most cars can navigate these at 20 miles an hour. But a lot of times they don't. I mean, people sometimes will almost, stop when they come to them, and it's totally unnecessary. But anyway, yeah, we're looking at. I think if we have that average speed of 20 to 25, in areas as you approach and as you leave from those speed cushion locations, that should result in about that 30 mile an hour that the street is posted. It's very natural for a driver to slow down at the speed cushion location itself and then speed back up a little bit. We know that happens, and it's designed to do that. We just don't want to space them out so far that becomes, really pronounced. And so, yeah, we're looking at that at the location of the speed cushion. We sign it at 20 because we think that, and that's really true whether we're using the 7 foot, the 10.5, or the 14. We keep our signage all the same. But yeah, over the length of that, I would not be surprised if our average speed was in 25, 30 mile an hour range.
Would you also comment on the duration of this intervention? I know, I don't imagine this is a forever thing, right? Is this for 6 months? Is it a year longer?
It's more like forever. I mean, unless it presents an issue that we just don't foresee and haven't encountered. No, this is not something that we put down and take up again. This is something that stays on the street. We do have a temporary intervention, which you may be familiar with. It's the radar feedback signs that just come out there for 3 or 4 weeks and then disappear again. These stay there once we make the investment in design and buy the materials and sign everything and put them in. Our intent is that they stay here. That means there's maintenance that has to go into that. These are holding up really well. We're seeing these cushions down, some of them 10 and 12 years now, and still look and are performing well. But at some point, they're going to need to be replaced. I guess we haven't gotten to that on any of our projects yet, but if and when that happens, I guess there can be a conversation then. But in the meantime, this is intended to be more of a permanent feature.
Can I ask one more question for fear of monopolizing the Q&A session of this? Do you notice a decrease in traffic with these? I mean, are there people that say, if I can't go 50 down Hillwood, it doesn't make sense to take it, I'll just stay on White Bridge and take a left? Or does the number of cars stay relatively unchanged?
NDOT is collecting some of that data now, and which is a really good thing. I mean, engineers always love data, but I would say to that though, this is an area where it really makes a difference on the type of street. Is the street the only one that makes that connection? If we were talking about Sylvan Park, where you've got a grid pattern and one street gets you to the same place as the next, I think your diversion and cut, the diversion from one street to another, it just seems to me like it would be much higher. on this street, it may have an impact, but it may not in terms of the numbers of vehicles. Again, we don't try to create that, but we know, again, anecdotally, that it likely will have some impact on lowering the number of vehicles, just because we go to some streets where the street next to it got selected, and now we're working on the street, and they said we definitely could tell a difference when the street next to us got speed cushions. Our street, the traffic went up, and so people will try to avoid it to some degree. But again, if there's not a really good alternative, I don't think people are going to go, a mile out of their way to avoid the street. But if one's just as good as the next, it certainly may push them to another street. It's just really hard to make that prediction about how much that'll happen.
We have an issue with trucks, like semi-tractor trailers, who are using this road as a cut through, and there's a weight limit in speeding it. Is that part of this study?
No, it's not, but that's interesting to know. Is this street signed as a truck restriction? I thought it was.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, I mean, that is a regulatory thing that, again, MNPD can enforce. They're really the only ones that can enforce that. You may find that by putting these on the street, and by the way, the trucks aren't going to hurt these. And we do have some of these in kind of somewhat industrial areas, and they hold up fine. But you may find that trucks don't want to go over them and would stay off the street because of it any better. But really, that's going to be an enforcement issue for MNPD. Whether or not they're going to do it or not, I don't know. But NDOT just doesn't have there's no enforcement mechanism there. But no, that's not part of the study, is to try and keep certain vehicle classes on.
The regulatory agency is NSPD, is that what you said?
No, the only enforcement agency on that would be MNPD, the police department.
Oh.
They would be the ones that would have jurisdiction over, stopping a motor vehicle and saying, hey, you violated this prohibition that exists on this street. I'm going to write you a ticket. They're the only ones that could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. This is Ernest Hoover. Thank you, Jeffrey, for doing this, and we greatly appreciate it, and echoing the thoughts and sentiments of others here. I live on Hillwood Boulevard, kind of equidistant between Hickory Valley and Kendall on the east side. As you're heading towards Charlotte in that area, that's uphill. If you're heading towards Post, that's downhill. For whatever reason, right about my spot, it seems to be extreme acceleration either direction. Just for your consideration, I can see that you've got one of these speed cushions kind of right about Hickory Valley. It's kind of a flattish area, and there is an intersection there. I would propose considering putting it kind of on that hill to the extent that you can on hills, because as I said, and you don't have the radar there, but that is an acceleration point for whatever reason. It seems like they seem to want to get up speed to make the hill, even though it's not that steep of a hill, or there's a lot of fun seekers that like to see how fast they can go down the hill. And I would propose moving that speed cushion a little bit closer to Charlotte rather than right at Hickory Valley. I know a lot goes into this, distance between cushions, etc. So, I can't just make one suggestion and it happens. I understand it. I'm just, you asked for feedback. I'm just giving you feedback that I believe if it were somewhere in that space, kind of on that hill, and it's not an extreme grade, that it might do a bit more good in calming things down than right there in that flat area of Hickory Valley.
No, that's great feedback, Ernest. I'm writing that down because that's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for. Is you all see this and live on the street and see how it works every day. That's really helpful. I did locate
my front yard if you want to.
Right. Yeah, and no, I think in this area it's the grades. It's going to be all about the grades. We can put these down up to a 6% grade. That's not that steep. So I think we will get to that pretty quickly. And then in some cases we can go up to 8%. So we'll certainly I appreciate that input. We'll look at that and see if we can't push that just a little bit higher up on that hill at that Hickory Valley location. That's helpful.
Great,
Thank you.
great. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Great feedback, questions. Anything else?
This is Norm again, and this I'm certain that this probably won't have any impact on litter, will it?
I don't think so. We haven't heard that one. I hadn't gotten that. So unless people are just mad, throw a bag out the window.
Yeah, I'm just constantly amazed at the litter here. So that's gotten worse over the years as well. So just
here.
I live on a collector myself, which is just a classification, a little bit more major road like this. And I know I'm constantly in my yard picking it up.
Yeah, same here.
Well, let me keep going with a little more of our next steps, just so you'll have an awareness of where we're going. But feel free to we'll be happy to come back to this if there's if you think of something else want to ask about it. There we go. So this is probably a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. So let me just kind of walk through it. This is our flow chart for how we do these projects. So we're here at the Red Circle, the neighborhood meeting. What we'll do after tonight, it sounds like there's general consensus on, the type of project that we're talking about here. We will go into the design phase where we'll come out on the road, look at those measurements, get our smart level out, look at those grades like we've talked about, and develop a set of true design plans. Now, these design plans are located on the NDOT website if you want to see the level of detail that's included there, but it'll say something like, this speed cushion will be located 67 feet from the driveway at 123 Hillwood Boulevard. Say something like that, so you can tell very precisely where we're proposing the speed cushion. And everyone will be done that way, and then we'll have the design. We will post that online. At that point, we've got an option, and we really like to know the answer to this question now. But in the past, we've had a mandatory 2 meetings. We went to every neighborhood twice and showed them. We showed them walk through the design, those detailed design plans at the second meeting. But what we found more often than not was people were like, "Yeah, you kind of told us this was happening last time. We didn't really need a second meeting to go through these level of details. You showed us, we understood it then." So we've made that second meeting optional. Be glad to do it if you feel like you want to see the design plans, or we need to change. We didn't have something right tonight, or whatever. Happy to do that. But if you'd rather just get on with it, we can do that too. And go straight from design into the ballot process. And so give that some thought. And if I forget to ask you, remind me if you feel like we want to do that design meeting, or if we just want to skip it and keep the process going, we can do that too. And then we're going to go in the online ballot. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then coming out of the ballot, we get into that construction queue. And if you're in favor of the speed cushions, this is where it's a little bit depressing, because if the ballot passes, we're looking right now at about 1 year before they're out there installing these things. And I know that seems like ridiculously long for this type of work. It is. NDOT knows it is. They're working hard with the contracting community to try and get contracts to do this work. We have Wonder, and they're the same group that does all the striping for the city and TDOT and everybody, and they just constantly stay behind with these projects. And so they're working hard to try and find a solution to that. But I say that so that you don't think, by 4th of July, we're going to have something out here, because that's not going to happen. So a little bit about that ballot process. People are sometimes interested in that. Hopefully you all got a card about this meeting. We sent those to everybody, every homeowner along the street. You'd get something similar during that ballot process. It'll just have a different QR code that'll take you directly to a balloting page on the Nashville.gov website. And then you'll just give a little bit of information on that and vote yes or no. That stays open for 6 weeks. And at the end of 6 weeks, we collect all of that information, And of the people that voted, if 2/3 of them are in favor of the project, it will move forward. And so there's not a set number of votes we're looking for. It's just like a real election. If you vote, you count, and if you don't, you don't. We don't penalize the project for people not voting. And so you can also call. There's a phone number on there if you want to call and give your vote. You can do that too. Here's the people who are eligible to vote. This is just a screenshot. This is not the whole street. But we only ballot residential properties, so we're not going to go ask the businesses that are down there closer to Charlotte, for instance. We do usually ballot church properties and things like that. So there may be a church here on the project. I don't remember. We only ballot the owners of the property. So if someone is renting their house, they may not see that. It's going to go to the owner, whatever the owner's address of record is. And then if someone owns more than one piece of property, we're only going to send each individual owner one ballot. You can't vote a bunch of times, even if you own multiple properties. And then the parcel has to have a house on it. I think probably everything here does, but if there is a vacant piece of property, that would not receive a ballot either. So that's the rundown on who gets to vote and how that works. Be glad if you have any questions on that to answer them. But here is contact information as we start wrapping up for tonight. NDOT is that. It's kind of a generic email address, but that's because they have a couple of different staff members who have access to that and are checking that. So feel free if you have questions or comments to get in touch with the city folks there. And I'm Jeff. I'm the one in green below, and that's my email address. So feel free to contact one or both of us if you think of other things after tonight's meeting that you'd like information on or like to share with us. And then, as I've been mentioning a couple of times, there is the link to the traffic calming website, so that you probably know how to find that. But that's it. But I didn't want to shortcut here. Any questions about the balloting process or any of that, or the timeline and procedures, or back to the plan itself?
Jeff, this is Norm again. Will you all be sending out the kind of a map showing where these will go in?
Yes, sir. That'll be I would say that'll be the best thing that we will send. We won't send it out just because we don't have everybody's contact information and everything. We will post that online. So in advance of the ballots going out, we will be posting the full design plans, and it'll be like 3 or 4 pages, and I think it's pretty readable. It's not like a roadway design plan that's just really complex. It's pretty basic. It's a little more detailed than what I showed you earlier, but you will have the ability to pull that up and go page by page and look at exactly where we're proposing to have the speed cushions. That will be available on the website. And the way you'll know it's there, when we send those balloting postcards out, that link will also take you to where those design plans are located. So we know people will get that balloting card and they will have never heard about this, or for whatever reason won't know anything about it. We want to make sure everyone before they votes has all the information that we can possibly give them about what we're proposing. So all that will happen at that point.
So the only way to have feedback before that final design is done is to go through the process you described earlier.
Yeah, having a second meeting. Yeah. Okay. If you want, if there's, I mean, you guys again are not a big group. If you felt like, or if one of you wants to kind of take this on for the neighborhood, and you say, we may not need a second meeting, but we'd kind of like to look at the plans before the ballot goes out. If you want to put an email address in that chat box, I'll be glad to I think what we would do is go ahead and post it, but I can just hold off on the ballot, and I'd be glad to let you know, hey, it's been posted. Take a look at it and let me know if you have any issues. I don't mind doing that. That's just up
I
to y'all.
couldn't, I don't want to, I don't, wouldn't, I'm not presuming to speak for the entire street here, but I would personally like to see it. Just
Sure. Yeah, let me make a note of that. You can either tell me, or if you want to put it in the chat box, your email address, that'll be fine. Or just email me at mine later after the meeting and let me know. And why don't you do that, Norm? Why don't you email me there, just so I'll put that in our project folder, and I will be reminded to send you a link to those plans. And any of you who want that to happen, I'll be glad to send that out in advance. Just shoot me an email asking me to do that, and I'll do it. That'll probably be. It could be another month or so. We ask. I think we say 2 months, but it'll be less than that. I'd say in the next month I should have those design plans done. Does that work for you?
Works for me, Jeff. Thank you very much.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Just Jeff Hammond at birchtransportation.com.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm looking back through the chat now. Just a couple of things. One is Tom's asking, do you need signatures to do anything? Not at this point. No, we won't do any. We used to do an actual petition where we asked the neighborhood sponsor to go door to door. You can imagine how that went. And some neighborhoods very organized, some not so much. And so yeah, we just do this. It's all an electronic ballot now. Radar signs, they Cherokee are permanent. Yeah, I mean, anything that we're putting out, kind of like the question before, yeah, we intend to be permanent. The only thing that's not are those trailer. You know when you see it, it's a trailer that is not permanent. And then Branding is asking about the slides. Yeah, we don't send the slides out just because we'll be recording this meeting, so you can kind of get them that way. And then I think this was a question about the chat. Yeah, again, I will have access to the chat, and so we can get that. If someone needs it, they can just contact me. It records it along with this recording of the meeting. All right. Anything else? I don't want to belabor the point and take your time unnecessarily. I again appreciate you taking the time to join us and your interest in the program. But anything final before we sign off?
It's been very helpful. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Very, very helpful.
I agree.
Great. Well, thank you all. And again, don't hesitate to reach out in the meantime if we can help further. With that, I'll wish you all a very good evening. Thanks again for joining us. Talk to you soon.
Thanks again.